Hello, and welcome to Churchy Chats with the Church Girl. My name is Alicia Wiley. If this is your first time here, I am the owner and creator of a Church Girl, which is a lifestyle brand and a clothing line that seeks to inspire and uplift everyone we have the privilege of connecting with. I, as always, am excited about tonight's episode, but it is the season 2 finale of Churchy Chats. So listen, make sure you share this broadcast, tag your family and friends, and get them on in the room to join this conversation. Let's get our guest for the evening in. Hi, Nicole. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well, and it just started raining in my background, so let me know if it gets a little too loud back
It's
there.
okay. It's okay. Ambient noise is always good. So
Okay.
say hello to the Churchy Chats audience. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I am Nicole Hardesty. I am by trade a journalist, a social media manager, and a mother of a beautiful 3-year-old Lincoln and of an angel baby, Bryant.
I am so glad that you are here, Nicole. I was thinking about it. We went to high school together, but we also went to the same college. After Katrina, we met up in Dallas, I think at SMU,
Mm-hmm.
after, you know, the tragedy that was Katrina, and then came home and both went to Tulane.
Mm-hmm.
So we were classmates for a little while. She did
Mm-hmm.
what she was supposed to do. She went straight through and finished. It took me a little while longer, but we still have the same alma maters. And I don't know when you stopped this, Nicole, but I used to follow your blog, The Big Easy Apple. Is that was the name of it?
Yeah, I had that when I first moved to New York. It was just supposed to be like, my transition from New Orleans, the Big Easy, to New York, the Big Apple. And then life took over and like I just ran out of time. Like bloggers do, if I would have kept that up, I would have been like on a level that bloggers are today because that's when I first got into it. But no, I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they do
Yeah, I loved it. It was, I'm telling y'all, it was like a Sex in the City for, like the young black woman. And,
it.
I understand that things happen, but, I'm gonna plant a little seed. Maybe you want to start blogging again.
Yeah, it'll be all about
Nicole,
mom stuff now.
Nicole is here tonight to tell a very important story, and I want to get right into it. We're here to talk about her daughter, Bryant, but I want to back up just a little bit. Nicole is the mother, as she mentioned, of an adorable, she's like my little child best friend in my head, adorable baby girl, Lincoln. And you shared on social media that both of your pregnancies were considered high risk. Can you
Hmm.
talk about your pregnancy with Lincoln and why it was considered high risk?
Yeah, so Lincoln's pregnancy, I had an incompetent cervix. And by
Okay.
the way, I've never known any of this terminology before being pregnant. I always thought you get pregnant, you make it past the first trimester, and you're in the clear. Happy
Yes.
baby 9 months later, 10 months later. So we learned with Lincoln early on that I had what's called an incompetent cervix. And
Hmm.
that's an umbrella of a bunch of different things that can be wrong with your cervix. Mine particularly was short.
Okay.
So they kept an eye on it like week after week. We did ultrasounds and just kept an eye on it, and it kept getting shorter.
Hmm.
The idea is your cervix stays long enough to keep the baby in until it's time for you, like your third trimester is when it should start getting shorter because then it completely disappears for you to have the baby. So mine was
Oh, wow.
disappearing a lot earlier than it should have. Um, and I got what's called a cerclage placed in, which stitches the cervix together to keep the
Hmm.
baby in so it doesn't come out prematurely. I got that done at 24 weeks, which is the absolute last day that you can get it done in your pregnancy
Hmm.
before it's too late. And it was an
Oh, wow.
emergency cerclage where I went in for an appointment and they're like, your cervix is completely gone. We have to stitch this up right away. And then was on bed rest for the next 5 months until she was born. So with that, being detected in that pregnancy, we went through a very uneventful, healthy birth.
Mhm.
So she made it full term. We had no issues with the delivery, and everything was great. She was born healthy. But knowing that we had that issue in that pregnancy, we were able to tackle it early in the next pregnancy and get that cerclage placed earlier in the pregnancy and not have it waiting to be an emergency cerclage. So that was Lincoln's high risk.
And it's interesting. You said, I've been thinking about this. You said at the beginning, none of these terminology did you know,
Mm-mm.
before getting pregnant. And I think there's a discrepancy in women being informed about all of the possible, I hate to say it, but dangers of
Mm-hmm.
pregnancy, and it's like all of a sudden you're pregnant or something happens, and then it's
Mm-hmm.
like, I didn't know anything about this. And I remember saying something to my mom once, and she was like, "Oh, that's common." And I'm like, "But when were we going to have this conversation? You
Yeah.
know, if it's so common."
Yeah. It's a lot of there. I mean, it's a catch-22 because what I've learned during all of this experience is there's so many things that can go wrong with pregnancy.
Hmm.
There's no way to know it all. There's
Sure.
no way to know it all. So it's kind of like it's where I thought prior to getting pregnant, you make your miscarriages are common in the first trimester.
Hmm.
That's all I
Hmm.
knew. So I'm like,
Right.
that's the only concern you have with pregnancy.
Hmm.
But no, that list is huge. There's no way to know it all. So it's kind of like I can say like, oh man, we should know more that can go wrong, but I don't have a solution on how to make us know more. It can't fit in the book, you know?
You're
So,
right.
but it is unfortunate that the things that do happen and the things that we do know that go wrong aren't talked about. So
Hmm.
a lot of people feel alone in their pregnancy issues and their pregnancy setbacks that they don't talk about it. But if every single person who ended up having gestational diabetes during their pregnancy
Hmm.
talked about it, we would know more about it. If every single
Right.
person who had late term miscarriage talked about their experience, we would know more about it. And that's how we'll learn about it. But a lot of women, we just don't talk because, and I mean, I know exactly why. It's
Hmm.
because you feel alone, you feel vulnerable, you feel like I'm watching all these healthy babies be born. I got to just go through this by myself. And
Yeah.
that's a really hard place to be in, but at that won't change until we talk about this experience, whatever your experience is, way more, you know.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm glad that you are talking about your experience, because you are educating a lot of women, people, couples, just people, who need to know this. People need to know that
Hmm.
they're not alone. And speaking of which, if you are watching and you know someone who has experienced loss in this way, please tag them. I promise you, this conversation is going to be something that they want to hear. So women often say, each pregnancy is different. You don't want to judge one off of the other. How
Hmm.
was your pregnancy with Bryant different than your pregnancy with Lincoln?
Honestly, for up to the 24 weeks I had with Bryant, um, I was sick as I don't know what with Lincoln, and I was sick as I don't know what with Bryant. I had also something I didn't know about. I had I'm gonna butcher the name. It's like hypermesis,
Hmm.
something with a G, HG for short. But basically, it's severe warning sickness throughout your entire pregnancy. Some women are hospitalized with it. Some are put on medication. I was on medication. I had no idea that can happen. I was like, oh yeah, a few weeks of being nauseous and that's it. Like no.
Hmm.
So I had that with Lincoln, and I definitely had it with Bryant. And I was hoping, banking on like, oh yeah, every pregnancy is different. Maybe I won't get sick this time. Nope,
Right.
didn't happen. I think the differences would have shown more past the 24 weeks with Bryant.
Hmm.
So I would have seen how, the weight gain. I would have seen if I had heartburn with this one where I didn't have it with Lincoln, or I would have seen if
Hmm.
I had different pains. I had a lower back pain with Lincoln, I might have not had with Bryant, but I just didn't get, far enough into my pregnancy to really notice those differences. But the beginning of it, they were identical. And I once I got that sick and once I started feeling the same, I was like, it's gonna be a girl because this is exactly how Lincoln treated me.
So you knew what was coming. So
Yeah.
you were in the hospital for a week with what you thought
Hmm.
was preterm labor. And then on
Hmm.
top of that, it was COVID. So can you tell
Hmm.
us about that experience? What must have been going through your head with the thoughts of preterm labor? But then were you alone in the hospital? Like, how did they handle that?
So that was tough. When we went to the emergency room because I was having the pains, they
Hmm.
would not let my husband come back to triage with me. So he had to
Oh,
wait in the
wow.
waiting room. And I was by myself, just kind of like, I went in thinking they were going to check things out and be like, oh, it's fine, go back home. So I wasn't nervous at this point. I'm just like, all right, I'm waiting for them to come tell me everything's okay. And I'm
Hmm.
overreacting. And once they gave me the news that I was contracting and it looked like I was going into labor, then I started panicking. I was like, my husband's in the waiting room. I need him. I need him. And they're like, we can't let him back until we admit you. Well, it took another maybe 30 minutes to admit me.
Hmm.
So that was about 30 minutes where I was sitting there alone and just
Oh,
really
wow.
scared. Like I was talking to him on the phone and texting him and everything, but it was, I needed him. So that sucked. Once I was admitted, then they let him back. And and he was with me. He didn't leave my side for the rest of the week, but I couldn't have any visitors.
Hmm.
We like I couldn't see Lincoln. That was the longest time I've gone without seeing her. Was that whole week in the hospital? Um, I say a week, but 10 days. You know,
Hmm.
and um, he was able to come and go, but I couldn't even switch. Like I couldn't even if he was gone, I couldn't even like let my mom come in or anything like that. So that was tough. And also with COVID, even if Bryant had gone full term, we had Lincoln in DC and it was just us. Nobody was there. So
Hmm.
I was hoping like at least with this one, my parents would have been able to like come to the hospital and see her when she was born. And I just
Sure.
knew in the back of my mind, like that wasn't going to happen because of COVID. And I was like,
Hmm.
well, at least DC gave us practice to be doing this like with no family and friends there. Um, but yeah, that was tough, especially when she was born. And then, that was like a dramatic situation when the labor actually happened. My husband called my parents and they rushed to the hospital, but they again still had to stay in the wait room. They couldn't come back and see me. Um, and when she was born, my mom got to go to the NICU to see her. I think they felt bad for me at that point, but my dad never got to meet her. Lincoln never got to meet her. No one else got to meet her. And that was a little heartbreaking because it was just like, you know, this is your granddaughter, this is your sister,
Right.
and those things. And that was very tough. Like I had to walk out after delivering her to the weight room to even see my dad because he couldn't
Oh,
come back.
wow.
Yeah. So those things
Yeah,
suck. But
and I don't know if people realize, like, we all had our struggles, during COVID, but my heart particularly went out to people like you, and people whose relatives had to be in the hospital. My
hmm.
mom actually had COVID and pneumonia, and she had to go to the hospital, and
Hmm.
it didn't register in my mind that I couldn't go with her, like until
Yeah.
the moment they were taking her away in the ambulance. Because although
Hmm.
I knew I couldn't go, my mind was telling me you're going, and
Right. Right.
that's tough. That's tough.
Hmm.
So I listen, sending you all love and light and hugs and all of that good stuff.
Thank
And
you.
again, I'm so appreciative that you are here tonight to tell your story. So we're going to take our first commercial break, but we'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Churchy Chats is now airing on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Be sure to like, subscribe, and follow on all platforms.
We're back with Nicole telling her story. And if you are just tuning in, make sure that you share this and tag your family and your friends. And please join this very important conversation. So, Nicole, you did speak a little bit about having the baby, but Bryant was born at 24 weeks and she survived a month after that. If you don't mind
Mhm.
telling us what eventually took Bryant's life and what was this time like, if you can describe it for you, your husband, your family?
So the NICU journey alone is a lot. It's very emotional. And that's something like we know a lot of people have been through. That's something
Sure.
that parents talk about all the time, but they don't talk about mostly when the baby doesn't come home, you know. So, but that journey, it's an emotional roller coaster because every single day I walked in, um, I could always tell that when the receptionist saw me, if I heard her pick up the phone and say, you know, Mrs. Hardiman is here, I'm like, okay, the doctor has something to talk to me about. And usually it's not good if it's like they have to come talk to me right away. So we had those days. We also had the days where we'd go in and the doctor would do rounds and say, hey, she had a great night. We're going to up her feeds and, you know, brain development is looking good and she's breathing on her own. We might take her off the ventilator. So every day it was different. It was either really good news or really bad news. And it's just like an emotional roller coaster. Um, so yeah, so think about that for a month straight. That it's just a lot.
Yeah.
It's very emotionally draining. Just as much as they have bad days, they have good days. So even when she did get that infection and they started telling me about it, I was like, okay, it's just one of those bad days. Tomorrow I'm going to come in and it's going to be the next round of good news. Um, the infection that she got it. It's called neck. It's a much longer name that I can't pronounce, but NEC, neck. And it's pretty much a bacteria infection of the intestines that happens in premature infants.
Okay.
There's not a lot of research on it. There's not a lot known about it, what causes it, you know, what helps it. There's not a cure for it. Some babies do get it and survive through it. Most don't. It's a very high mortality rate. And ironically, at the beginning of her NICU stay, somebody on the research team at Children's Hospital came to talk to me about they were doing a case study and they were asking me if I would let them take her stool samples for this research. And I guess, you know, her stool was just going to be analyzed as a baby who didn't have it. And if she never got it, then she would be in like the healthy baby compared to the babies that did have it. So, and they promised me like, all we want is her dirty diapers. That's it. I was like, okay, that's harmless. Sure, why not? And that was the first time I was introduced to it. And I was, you know, reading up on it in the paperwork. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy. Like all these things can happen to these little babies. And ooh, I'm glad we don't have to deal with that right now. And fast forward a month later, that's exactly what took her life. So I'm just hoping that whatever she was able to give them during that study would help them with whatever research they need. But I remember it was a Thursday. I went into the NICU. I went in late that day because I think I had something to do that morning. So I went in late that day and was just going to stay into the evening. And she wasn't acting herself, you know, she wasn't as like active and just, you know, even though she was that small, she had personality. So like I already knew the girl, like how she responded to my voice, to my touch. She wasn't acting herself. And the nurses were in the room a lot more than usual. But I was sitting there, I was pumping, I was working. And I remember staying like extra late that night, like until midnight, because I just didn't feel comfortable leaving with whatever. It just didn't feel right. So I kind of was hanging out late. And then when I finally went home and got to bed at like 1, at 3 a.m., we got a phone call. And that's the other thing. Like when you're in NICU, you're so nervous about the phone ringing because it could be they don't call you for good news. The good news waits until you come in the next morning. They don't call you for good news. So they got a phone call at 3 a.m. and they said that she has this infection that they've been keeping an eye on and it's starting to get pretty bad and that they would need to transfer her to Children's Hospital. We were at Toro. Toro has a level 3 NICU, which is where you want premature babies to go, but Children's Hospital has a level 4, and that's for the really, really, really sick babies. So to risk moving her and her tubes and her everything to Children's Hospital, like, I knew was bad, because they wouldn't risk that for no reason at all. So that scared me. I was like, okay, this is different. This is scary. Once they got her in, we went. It was like at 5 o'clock in the morning, and she completely was out of it. And, you know, the doctor started trying to explain to us that this is neck, that there's a high mortality rate, that, you know, she might not survive, that babies die from this all the time. He used the word die, mortality, not survive with me more than I've ever heard. And, you know, in hindsight, I'm like, he was really telling me she's not going to survive this. Like, he was really trying to tell me without saying, like, hey, look, your kid's not going to make it. So they were going to perform a surgery, and they just said, like, she's on a lot of pain medication right now, so that's why she's not acting herself. But you can just look at her. She just looks sick. She just was not who she was 2 days before. And the whole time we were there, I didn't feel comfortable. Like, I didn't. And I was just like, maybe it's because we've been at Toro for a month and I just have to settle in at Children's, but nothing felt right to me there. Nothing felt like, okay, we're about to be here for the next 2 months while she gets better and is able to come home. And that day she just got worse and worse and worse and worse, until that evening she started going into cardiac arrest. And, you know, all the doctors, like, she had a permanent nurse by her bedside, so I knew it was bad. But when she started kind of coding, the doctors and nurses came in, they did everything they could. They bagged her, they, you know, stuck her with all the adrenaline. What is it? Like, so if you watch any doctor shows of Grey's Anatomy, and they're like, I need another round of epi. Like, I heard that like 6 times, and apparently that brings them back to life. So, so they got her stable, and then the doctor came to us, and they're like, this is what you're looking at moving forward. Her organs are going to continue to fail. We can keep reviving her and see what happens, but every time we go through this, it's more damage to her body, to her brain, to her organs. And if she survives this, there won't be any, like, she won't have full brain functionality, and, you know, quality of life will be low and all that stuff. So he basically was giving us the chance to decide how she dies, which I appreciated. And we talked it through. My husband in the beginning wanted to just keep reviving her, and I'm like, we can't do that to her. Like, we can't. I mean, as much as we want her here with us, we can't selfishly do that and give her this poor quality of life. He's already telling us, like, either way, she's not going to be who she is and who she was. So we decided that he couldn't give us like a hours, minutes, days, weeks kind of thing. So I was like, okay, well, we absolutely want to be here for her last moment. So if it's while we're still in the hospital and this happens, we will let her go naturally. If we are not here, say it's tomorrow or the next day, and we happen to not be here, it's overnight, then we'd like you to revive her. Give us time to get here, and then we'll let her go. So that was the plan. That happened about 10 p.m. that night, and she was stable for the next few hours. We stayed overnight. We were not leaving that night. And then around 3 a.m., it happened again. So her organs started shutting down, and, you know, they came in and they're like, okay, are we still with the plan? And we're like, yeah. So we just got to hold her. They unhooked everything, and we just got to hold her in like those final moments. Sorry.
It's okay.
And it was just really, really nice to be able to hold her without all the machines hooked up to her,
Mhm.
you know, while she was still conscious, but you could tell, you know, you could tell she was in pain. So, mm,
Take your time. It's okay.
so yeah, we got those last moments with her, and then she just took her last breath in our arms, and that was it.
That's it's amazing that you can even share your story, and I'm so grateful for your willingness to do that. Um, a few weeks, maybe a few months ago, you talked about how your husband's grief looked a little bit different, or how you
Mm-hmm.
all were handling it differently. How are you able to kind of be there for one another when you know what you need at different times? Maybe two completely different things.
Mm-hmm. So we were very lucky in the sense that we've both experienced close deaths of our own prior to this. So I had a couple of months before Bryant lost my grandmother, and him a couple of years ago lost his father. So I learned how he grieved, and he learned how I grieved. He likes to be surrounded, talks, talking it out, talking about, talking, just sharing.
Hmm.
He needs that around him when he's grieving. I need to be alone. I need to fully process on my own before I can bring anybody else in this with me.
Hmm.
Um, we can't grieve together if you're not grieving what I'm grieving, basically.
Hmm.
So I knew that about him and he knew that about me. So with Bryant, immediately when it happened, his family is in Houston. So, he called his mom, his brother, and his best friend came to New Orleans. We came home. I went upstairs and was in my room for 48 hours sleeping and just being alone while he had his best friend and his brother and his mom around him. Like I had my parents here too. They also were able to give me my space just because they knew that was the best thing for me. And then when my husband and I were together, like if he was to come upstairs and check on me, I knew he needed company, so I would sit there with him, but he knew I needed silence. So, and we talked. We would talk throughout it. Like he's the only person I would talk to about it because he's the only other person I knew that knew what I was going through. And even
Hmm.
then, I still felt a little alone because, like it's our child, but like she was inside of me, like,
Hmm.
so should have brought Kleenex out here. So just even being like her mother,
Hmm.
not saying I was grieving more than my husband, but I was definitely grieving different on a different level.
Sure.
Um, so that still felt alone,
Hmm.
And it was just like we understood these things about each other, and that's what I think helped get us through it. So, he wasn't like, why aren't you talking to me? And I wasn't like, leave me
Right.
alone. It wasn't anything like that. We really respected each other in the way we needed and what we needed from each other at that time. So that definitely made that process for us a lot easier. We always allowed to share feelings
Hmm.
with each other. I just was not in a place to socialize. So he understood that he was fine. He gave me that grace and that space I needed to not be bothered with other people. Like he was the only person I wanted to see for a week.
Hmm.
Um, and as far as my family, I know it was really hard. Like my parents are awesome. They are wonderful. They have been such a strong backbone through my entire life and have been able to get me through anything I've ever experienced because
Hmm.
of their wisdom and the life that they lived. And they can say, oh, I lost a job, let me talk you through this. And it was really heartbreaking to see on their faces when I got home from the hospital, like this is the one time in their life that they were like, I don't know how to get you through something like this, because they haven't experienced it. And I just, that helplessness in them, that I'm sure it hurt them, it hurt me. So we all kind of had to figure that out together also. And they gave me my space. They let me kind of go through what I needed to go through. And everybody was just really helpful. Like if I needed them, they waited till I reached out, which is what I needed. And some people don't need that. Some people need you to just like jump in,
Right.
So, yeah, but everybody was, family. Like they did exactly what I needed to do. So that was helpful.
Yeah, and it's wonderful to hear that, you had a support system and you had people who were willing to respect your process.
Yeah.
So that's good to hear. And I'm going to insert another question in here. I know that grief looks different pretty much every day, right? We don't know how we're going to feel. Really the next hour, minute, it's very unpredictable.
Right.
So for people in your life, did you have moments where you had to say, this is not what I need from you right now? Or did everyone pretty much follow your lead,
I
and
had
kind of gave
to.
you what you needed?
So when Ryan was in the hospital in NICU, I didn't share that on social media. So only close family and friends knew. So I didn't have like an over pouring of just people. But it did get to a point where everybody who did knew would text and check in every day. And the how are you, how is Bryant question was so hard for me, because then I had to stop and think about how I am. Like it's like people ask that because they want to hear you say I'm fine, and then it makes them feel better. And I'm like, I can't take the responsibility of you feeling okay about what I'm going through right now. So I did have to stop the communication. Like would tell people, hey, if you need to talk about me or Brian right now, I need you to go to Demetrius and let him answer you. He was fine with that. He could take it on. So while she was in the hospital, that like I did need to set that boundary that like I can't answer these questions every day. So people would go through him. Hey, how's Nicole? How's Brian? And he would handle it just fine, because he knew, because we talked every day. He knew all, like he would come. I was at the NICU all day, every day. He would come for a few hours a day, because he would stay home with Lincoln and he was working from home, COVID. So he would be working at home and I would be working in the NICU. And so he was able to give the updates. When she passed, I did send to those same family and friends who actually knew a text of just like, here's where we are. She's no longer with us. Please respect our privacy at this time. And I think because they saw how I had to react during, and not in a bad way react, but like, how I had to kind of slow communication down while she was in the NICU, nobody bothered me. And that's exactly what I needed. And, they still went to my parents or Demetrius or, to get their updates. But I really did have, my real alone time to process. Because again, like the things going through my head and just like me trying to even come to terms with, like, it's really hard to be also having to make sure everybody else feels okay about this situation that they're not even really going through. That was a lot. And that was a very clear boundary I had to set. But of course it was a lot of like flowers and cards and food. The most helpful thing was the food, because it's just like, great, I don't have to think about this right now. Yeah, I got a lot of outpour, but it was filtered through my parents and Demetrius. And that was, and like, like really, I'm not talking for like months. I'm talking about like in the first week, and then slowly as time went on, I was able to kind of crawl out of my hole after I've, dealt with myself and dealt with, my own thoughts and feelings and everything. And then I can start sharing this with other people. And I think like about 2 weeks after she passed is when I shared even that she was born, even that I was pregnant. Like, I don't think I didn't share any of that. So, I shared all of that with the world. But I was in a much better place to receive those thoughts and prayers and feelings and emotions and stuff, where I could handle them better. That was really important to me to have that time to myself, though.
So we've mentioned Little Lincoln throughout. How was telling her? Was that what you expected? Better than you expected? Worse than you expected? I mean, I guess there's not a better or worse, but what was that experience like?
So fortunately for me, and because of COVID, Lincoln never officially met her. She was 2.5 at the time. So she knew there was a baby, but I wasn't showing a lot, first of all. But she knew, we talked about a baby. She knew while Brian was in the hospital that every morning when I left the house, I was going to see Brian. So she would say like, Mommy's going to see Brian. And she'd make like little cards and pictures for her. But she never physically met Brian. And I think that got us over that hump of having to really explain why there was a baby here, but now there's not. Brian is absolutely present around us. She's seen pictures of Brian. She uses Brian's name about every day. Every time we say her night prayers or pray over food, it's always amen and thank you, Brian. She mentions Brian, Brian's my sister. Brian, she'll randomly come up and say like, oh, I made this for Brian. But she doesn't know that Brian is a physical being that's supposed to be here with her right now. So we can just we just keep that going, where it's like, that's very sweet. Like, I have my tattoo with her feet. And she'll be like, I want to give Brian a kiss. And she'll kiss my wrist. So, yeah, we never had to really explain. So there are times where she'll say, where's my sister Brian? And I'll explain that she's in your heart. And just like my grandmother died a couple of months before Brian, who Brian's actually named after her, that, she might say, where's Mama? And like, I'll say, she's in your heart. So when I say Brian's in your heart, she'll be like, with Mama? And I say, yeah. So she understands that. Or I'll say with God, with Jesus. She understands that God and Jesus are not physical beings with us, but they are much bigger and just inside of us and in everything that we see. So she connects that Brian is not physically here with us, but she is with people that she knows like love and protect her and exist outside of this world. I do know and really look forward to the day where she's a little older to have the conversation. I think it'll be very fulfilling because she has grown to love Brian so much and can understand when we do have the death conversation. She'll be able to tie it in pretty neatly with what she already knows, and it won't be out of like nowhere, What I do wonder about is when she does get another little sibling, that there will be a physical baby there. And then I wonder if she's going to connect. Well, hey, I have a baby sister named Bryant, but I also have this baby brother sister. So this one's here. Where's Bryant? Like, I wonder if that's going to be a conversation, but that might be when we introduce that conversation. So we'll see how that goes. I'll cross that bridge when we get there. But it was, so I know you say like, it can't be better, but it was actually better in the sense of like, I guess this is a thank you, COVID, that we didn't have to go to that extreme just yet.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
that's really beautiful how she has responded and how she really does hold her little sister in her heart. And
Mhm.
Mother's Day was recently, and you posted about how you were so grateful for Lincoln. Can you talk a little bit about how Lincoln has
Man,
helped you through this situation?
listen, if this had happened to Lincoln, and not because she's Lincoln versus Bryant, but because she was
It
the
was the
first
first.
pregnancy.
Hmm.
If this had been my first pregnancy, Alicia, I wouldn't have survived.
Mm.
I wouldn't have. And I don't understand how the mothers who do,
Hmm.
because now I'm fine, but at that time, if I had to wake up every day and not have Lincoln to go forward for, I wouldn't have made it because it's she's literally the reason I was able to get out of bed every day
Hmm.
because I had to go be a mom.
Sure.
And she's the reason I made it through the holidays, that I made it through my birthday, that I made it through Mother's Day. Just
Hmm.
and that's what that post was about. I was like, I have anxiety around Mother's Day, but it's not because like, I don't have Bryant.
Hmm.
It's because like I'm so thankful that I have Lincoln. And then I start thinking about the mothers who have lost children who don't have another one to pull them through. And I'm like, I don't know how they do it. I really, really don't know. And as strong as like, I know I've been as strong as everybody's been telling me I've been, I don't think I would have been that strong. So yeah, she is the reason I got through all of this. And the day we came back home after from the hospital after Brian died,
Hmm.
it was we were getting here at like 6:30, 7 a.m. And that's around the time that Lincoln wakes up. So, I know she heard us come in and she came downstairs with the biggest smile on her face to see us. And I don't even know how I was able to smile back at her, but there was no other option. Like she just pulled it
Hmm.
out of me. The most traumatic thing in my life just happened, and here she is making me smile. It was just, I don't know. I don't know how I mustered that up for her, but I did. So yeah, she's the only reason. Only reason. I did not
And
think I was gonna
that's
cry this much.
it's okay. It's so beautiful to hear, and I'm actually glad that you shared it on social because although people, are from a distance, it gives people an opportunity to kind of share your grief a little bit, even though it
Hmm.
does not at all come close,
Right.
to what you, your husband, and your family is going through. But it just allows, you know, a couple more prayers, a few more well wishes. And it was very brave of you to share that. So thank you for
Mhm.
sharing it. Um, it
Honestly, I just didn't want to feel like I was gonna pretend like she never existed
mhm.
because nobody even knew I was pregnant. So
Right.
it was like, as of right now, the world doesn't even know she was
Mhm.
thought of, and that didn't sit well with me. I was,
Mhm.
but it's a very vulnerable and lonely feeling. I did find a support group on Facebook for infant loss
Mhm.
that helped. Just being in the same space with other moms who experienced this, and like they're the only people that you can talk to who can understand, and that felt good. Um, but also it's a group of 10,000 women. So you look at
Wow.
that and you're like, 10,000 is a small number in the grand scheme of things, but it's a big number.
It's huge.
It's a big number. And you just don't realize how often, you know, and you know babies die, right? But
Sure.
you don't know 10,000 stories.
Right.
And that's just, I hate that feeling is so lonely when there's so many other people out there who really can connect with you. You just have no idea because it's just not shared. It's not talked about. So
Yeah. That was very brave of you to share. And, from sharing, we sometimes see, we get strength and comfort from unexpected places.
mhm,
We're going to take one last commercial break and we will wrap up this interview when we come back. I'm saying this before the break. I usually say it after the break, but go ahead and still share this. We still have a lot to talk about. Anybody you know that needs to hear this conversation, make sure they hop on this as we wrap up the season finale of Churchy Chats. We'll be right back. So you've been very vocal about, grief and people supporting those who are grieving. Can you talk to us a little bit about what support in the long term looks like? A lot of times we have this flood of support at the beginning. And
mhm,
then, time passes and people kind of get on with their lives. But those of us who are in the experience, sometimes we're still right there. So, what does support in the long term look like from family, friends, just in general?
so one thing I've had to actually tell people now, because I know how I was in the beginning with like protect my
Hmm.
privacy and whatnot. I shared what I shared, but it took time for me to get to, January when I shared the whole thing from beginning to end.
Hmm.
Long term is talk about our baby. Don't act like it didn't happen. Don't ignore
Hmm.
that she's here. Try really hard not to get uncomfortable when I mention her.
Hmm.
Um, she's a part of me, and I don't want her memory to disappear. So when I'm in a group of women and we're talking about our pregnancies, and I might be able to be like, well, Lincoln, da 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 da, and with Brian, I had blah blah blah. I
Hmm.
can see people kind of be like, oh no, she mentioned Brian, and I'm like, no, it's all right.
Right.
Ask me more about her pregnancy. Ask me what she did when she was cold in the NICU. I have answers.
Hmm.
She was a person, and I think like that just shows us that I'm not the only one remembering her. Now, you don't need to
Hmm.
call me and be like, "Hey, girl, let's talk about Brian today." I don't. That's
Right.
weird, right? But I don't mean the freeze up. I don't mean the like right now. Oh, there's one time I was loud. Right now, I'm crying talking about it, but because
Hmm.
like it's an emotional conversation. But it just that's why
Sure.
I'm like I'm so surprised I'm crying because I could talk about her. I could talk about all
Hmm.
of this. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't, and I don't shy away from that. I don't run away from the feelings. I like to feel them. Um, but yeah, just that like even if it's as little as if I'm mentioning her or if someone's
Hmm.
mentioning their loved one, it's not a time for you to get weird and change the subject. It's a time for you to embrace that that's what they want to include that in the conversation. Um, just as they would have for a living loved one. I
Right.
think that's like the best long term support as of today. Now, if you ask me in 5 years, I might have a different long term support answer.
Right.
But as being a year out, that's probably the thing that stands out for me the most.
Yeah.
And I know there's a lot of people who would feel like now that I've been connected to more mothers who've lost, um,
Hmm.
a lot of them feel slighted when everybody doesn't remember their child's birthdays.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel that way because nobody remembers Lincoln's birthday unless I tell him it's his birthday. So I don't feel that way about Bryant. But it's kind of like know your audience. If you know if somebody you're close to would feel that way, then set a calendar alarm because
Mm-hmm.
I do know a few people who feel that way. Birthdays, death dates, remembering in those kind of ways. Um, yeah, but for me, it's just let me talk about her or talk about her. It's fine.
Yeah. And I think that's something that people wouldn't even think about. We get so clammy, like you said, and weird
Hmm.
around certain situations, but knowing that that's something that does bring you comfort, um,
Hmm.
I think that's beautiful. I really do. So, Nicole, tell us what words of encouragement or even advice, if we can say that, that you would have for someone who's going through the same situation that you experienced.
So the best thing I did was I allowed myself to feel all the feelings. I didn't push any of them down. I didn't, convince myself otherwise. I just sat with them. And the only way to get through something like that is to go through it. You're not going to go under it, over it, around it, skip it. And that was the way the process was as comfortable as it was for me. And not that it was comfortable and not that I did it like flawlessly, but it
Mm-hmm.
really I didn't fight it. I didn't fight the process. Because there was times, of course, when I was like, okay, what could I have done different? What should the doctors have done different? I went through all of that. And I didn't stop myself. They'll be like, don't blame yourself. I'm like, this is not me blaming myself, but I am going to allow myself these thoughts. I am going to allow myself to process and analyze. On the other side of that, I did come out with, no, I thought it all the way through. Everybody did absolutely everything they could do, and it's nobody's fault. But if I would have stopped myself from thinking about that with the don't blame yourself, get those thoughts out of my head, they'd still be haunting me. And I'd still be like, don't do it,
Right.
don't do it. And now, if you ask me today, like, is there anything you would have done different? I can confidently tell you no because I went through that process already.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like just allow yourself those feelings, allow yourself the grace and the patience to have those moments. And that's what me and my husband call them. We call them Bryant moments. So if
Mm-hmm.
ever like we got emotional out of nowhere, I'll be sitting there and start crying. And I'll just be like, I'm just having a Bryant moment. And he would understand and he would, give me a hug and he would just sit there quietly with me. And like, I wouldn't stop myself from crying. I wouldn't stop myself
Mm-hmm.
from feeling. Sometimes I had to go get in the shower and ugly cry for an hour, but
Right.
that stuff needs to come out. And that's the only way you're going to get through this in one piece.
Yeah,
That's what
and
I
I
tell
think so
everybody.
often when we're grieving any situation, we feel like we have to just somehow get past it, but not get through it.
Hmm.
We
Hmm.
just want to
Yeah.
fly over it, but
Mhm. And for
dealing with it is always.
however long that takes. And I will promise you, time helps.
Hmm.
Every day is better than the last. Every
Hmm.
single day is better than the last. Time helps. There's no rush. It'll take some people a month. It'll take some people a year. I know people who were years into this and still felt like it happened yesterday, but time helps. I really like if I can tell women in this situation anything else, it's like
Hmm.
please be patient and kind with yourself with this process.
Yeah,
Nothing
and
else will help.
this is such an important conversation, because I remember reading your post and I watched your live that you did, and I was just like, and I've been wanting to get you on the show to talk about it because it's just so important that when you can, it's not something that you want somebody to do if they're not ready, but
Mhm.
when you can and if you can, so many other people, women, couples, are going through these things. So when you can find someone who even understands a little bit what you're going through, it helps somehow along the way. And Nicole, I am so grateful that you came on Churchy Chats to share your story and to tell us all about baby Bryant. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And you got me crying and everything.
And that's okay. So
Mhm.
tell us, Nicole, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, maybe, you're taking speaking engagements. I don't know.
I listen, I don't know if this is where that's headed, but this is the third podcast. People are like, come share with my audience. And I was like, I didn't know people cared this much about what I got to say, but hey, I'm like, I really do feel like it's a lot to be said. Um, especially to especially the people who don't know what this is like, and especially the people
Mhm.
who are going through this and just need to know that you're not alone. That was the biggest thing. It's the most isolating feeling ever. And I got so many messages when I started sharing this stuff about, you know, thank you for sharing. I thought most of it was about miscarriages, but like
Mhm.
it just I thought I was alone with a late term miscarriage or stillbirth and things like that. I'm like, no, girl, we in this together
Yeah.
because it's happening. So yeah, no, I'm absolutely open to anybody who wants to just talk with me more because I'm an open book where this is concerned. Like once I opened it up, it's open.
Mhm.
So
So tell
I'm all
people where
for
they
it.
can find you on social if they do want to further the conversation or if they just want to
Mhm.
follow your journey. How can they
Yeah,
do that?
so I put it on my name over here. So
Yes.
at Nicole Hardesty, at Nicole underscore Hardesty, Hardesty. That's on everything. Um, and Nicole Hardesty on Facebook as well. Yep.
Thank you so much again, Nicole, for
Mhm.
wrapping this season of Churchy Chats. I really, like I said, I wanted to reach out earlier, kind of after you did your first live, and this just kind of happened, and I'm so
Mhm.
grateful. Thank you. You are forever in my prayers and in my heart, and so is Bryant and
Thank
Lincoln
you.
and your family. And I would love to have you back on Churchy Chats. We can talk more about this, or you
Yeah.
can be a panelist, whatever. But I would love to have you back. And again, thank you so much for coming on and telling your story tonight.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, everybody, this wraps up season 2 of Churchy Chats. Thank you so much again for your love and support. Thank you for tuning in on this special night. We usually air on Tuesday, but it's Thursday. So I just want to say thank you for following us over here on a different night. We will have some bonus episodes and some pop up episodes over the summer. So make sure that you're following us on all social media outlets. Churchy Chats, a church girl, is where you can find us. I have had such a wonderful time, as always, hosting Churchy Chats, and I'm excited about season 3 that will be back in September. So make sure you stay connected. And again, I appreciate all the love and support. Make sure that you're following us so you don't miss a thing and you're ready for season 3. So again, thank you. Every blessing always. And I will see you in the fall, same place, same time on Churchy Chats with the Church Girl. Good night.